Indeed, the possession of Rhodes by the Ottomans was indispensable for free communication between Constantinople and her new conquests along the Syrian coast and in Egypt, and for the establishment of the supremacy of the Ottoman navy in the east of the Mediterranean, which Solyman was determined to effect. On the 18th of June 1522, the Ottoman fleet of 300 sail quitted Constantinople for Rhodos. Beside its regular crews and immense cargoes of military stores, it carried 8,000 chosen soldiers and 2,000 picniers. At the same time, Suleiman led an army of 100,000 men along the western coast of Asia Minor. The place of rendezvous, so fleet and army, was the Bay of Marinaris, where long afterwards, in 1801, the English fleet and army under Sir Ralph Abercrombie were mustered as allies of the Turks for the reconquest of Egypt from the French. The Grand Master of Rhodes at the time of Suleiman's attack was Phileas de L'Isle Adam, a French knight of prowess and valor. The garrison consisted of 5,000 regular troops, 600 of whom were knights. Besides this, the seafaring men of the port were formed into the effective corps. The citizens were enrolled and armed in the peasantry, who crowded from the rest of the island into the city of escape to Turkish marauders, were disciplined as pioneers, and the serfs were made to work on the fortifications. The defences of the city had been much increased and improved since the siege by Mahomet II's troops. And even if the outer walls were breached and carried, there were no inner lines of the strong walls prepared to check the assailants, and several quarters of the city had their own distinct fortifications, so as to be tenable, like the quarters of the ancient Syracuse, even after other parts of the city were possession of the besiegers. Solyman landed in the island of Rhodos on the 28th of July, 1522, and the siege began on the 1st of August. It was prolonged for nearly 5 months by the valor of the Isle Adam and his garrison, and by the skill of engineer Martinego. The war was waged almost incessantly underground by mines and countermines, as well as above ground by cannonade and the bombardment, desperate sallies, and still more furious assaults. A breach was effected and some of the bastions of the city were shattered early in September, and 4 murderous attempts at storming were made and repulsed during that month. 3 more assaults, one on the 12th of October, one on the 23rd, and one of the 3rd of November, were fiercely given and heroically withstood. Though the effect of the cannonade on the fortifications was more and more visible, the Turkish commanders at length resolved to lavish no more lives in attempts to storm the city, but to trust to their mines and artillery for its gradual destructions. Advancing along trenches according to the plan of gradual approach, which since has been habitually employed, but which was previously unknown, or at least never used so systematically, the Turks brought their batteries to bear closer and closer upon the city. Ahmed Pasha délibéré es donner place désormais service. It happens that the first regular approaches against the fortress were introduced by this people, and the lengths established themselves within the first defences. Solyman now offered terms of capitulation, and the besieged reluctantly treated for their surrender. There were yet the means of prolonging the defence, but there were no hopes of succour, and the ultimate fall of the city was certain. Honourable terms might now be obtained, the order might be preserved, though forced to seek a home elsewhere, and the Rhodians might gain protection from the conqueror for person and property, to continue their resistance until the exasperated enemy overpowered them would be not only to sacrifice themselves, but to expose the citizens to the massacre and their wives and daughters, to the worst horrors of war. This reasons White with the Lysel Adam and his knights, as with truly brave men, and they laid down their good swords, which they had so honourably wielded, that they did their duty to Christendom, in their surrender as well as in their previous resistance, was proved afterwards by the effectual check which their order gave to Solyman at Malta. How much heroism would the world have lost if the knights of St. John had obstinately sought in Rhodos the fate of Leonidas? By the terms of capitulation, 25 December 1522, which Solyman granted to the knights, he did honor to unsuccessful valour, and such honor to reflected with double lustre on the generous victor. The knights were to be at liberty to quit the island with their arms and property within 12 days in their own galleys, and they were to be supplied with transporters by the Turks if they required them. Rhododian citizens and becoming the sultan's subjects were to be allowed the free exercise of their religion. Their churches were not to be profaned. No children were to be taken from their parents, and no tribute was to be required from the island for 5 years. The insubordinate violence of the Janissaries caused some infraction of these terms, but the main provisions of the treaty were fairly carried into effect. By Suleiman's request, an interview took place between him and the Grand Master before the knights left the island. Solyman addressed through his interpreter words of respectful consolation to the Christian veteran, and turning to the attendant vizier, the Sultan observed, "It is not without regret that I forced this brave man from his home in his old age." Such indeed was the esteem with which the valor of the knights had inspired the Turks that they refrained from defacing their armorial bearings and inscriptions on the buildings. For more than 300 years, the Ottomans have treated the memory of their brave foemen with the same respect, and the essentials of the Knights of St. John who fought against Sultan Süleyman for Rhodos still decorate the long-captured city. Suleiman had experienced the turbulence of the Janissaries at Rhodos, and he received 3 years afterwards a more serious proof of the necessity of keeping that formidable body constantly engaged in warfare and under strict but judicious disciplines. The years 1523 and 1524 had not been signalized by any foreign war. The necessity of quelling a revolt of Ahmed Pasha, who had succeeded the Khair Bey in the government of Egypt, had occupied part of the Ottoman forces, and after the traitor had been defeated and killed, Solyman sent his favorite Grand Vizier Ibrahim, a Greek renegade, into that important province to resettle its administration and assure its future tranquility. Suleiman's personal attention for the first 18 months after the campaign of Rhodos was earnestly directed to improving the internal government of his empire. But in the autumn of 1525, he relaxed in his devotion of the toils of state, and quitting his capital and repaired for the first time to Adrianople, and followed there with ardor the amusement of the chase. The Janissaries began to murmur at their sultan's forgetfulness of war, and at the last day broke out into the open brigade and pillaged the houses of the principal ministers. Solyman returned to Constantinople and strove to quell the storm by his presence. He boldly confronted the munitions troops and cut down two of their ringleaders with his own hand, but he was obliged to pacify them by a donative, so he afterwards partly avenged himself by putting to death many of their officers whom he suspected of having instigated or of having neglected to check the disorder. He then recalled his vizier Ibrahim from Egypt and, by his advice, determined to lead his armies into Hungary, with which country he was still at war. So, no important operations had taken place since the campaign of Belgrade. Süleyman was at this time vehemently urged to invade Hungary by Francis I of France, who wished to distract the arms of his rival Charles V. And on the other hand, an ambassador had been sent from Persia, the natural foe of Turkey, to the courts of Charles and the King of Hungary to form a defensive and offensive league against the Ottomans. In 1526, the solyman invaded Hungary with an army more than 100,000 strong and 200 pieces of artillery. Like his predecessors Selim and Mahomet II, he paid extreme attention to this important arm of war, and throughout his reign the artillery of the Ottomans was far superior in number, in weight of metal, in equipment, and in the skill of the gunners of that possessed by any other nation. King Louis and Hungary rashly gave battle, with a far inferior force to the invaders. The Hungarian cavalry charged with their wonted gallantry, and a chosen band forced their way to where Solyman had taken his station at the head of his Janissaries. The Sultan owed his life to his cuirass, against which the lance of a Magyar knight was shivered. But the fiery valor of the furious Hun was vain against superior numbers, arms, and discipline. In less than 2 hours the fate of Hungary was decided. King Louis eight of his bishops, the greater number of the Magyar nobles, and 24,000 Hungarians of lower rank had perished. Search was made by the victors for the body of King Louis, which was found in a stream near the field of battle. Louis had been wounded in the heat and was endeavoring to escape, but his horse was forced from the bank by the throng of his fleers, and the weight of his armor bore him down in the deep water. The Sultan felt a generous sorrow on learning the fate of his rival Sovereign, who was nearly his equal in years. Solyman exclaimed, "May Allah be merciful to him, and punish those who mislead his inexperience. I came indeed in arms against him, but it was not my wish that he should thus be cut off while he had scarcely tasted the sweets of life and royalty." This battle was fought at Mohaj, and the 28th August 1526, and is still known by the terribly expressive name of the destruction of Mohaj. After this decisive victory, Solyman marched along the Danube and the twin cities of Buda or Ofen and pesth on the opposite banks of the river, and the capital of Hungary at once submitted to him. The Akanji swept the whole country with fire and desolation, and it seemed as if it was the object of the Ottomans to make a desert rather than a province of Hungary. At last, at the end of September, Solyman began his homeward march. His soldiers were laden with the richest plunder, and they drove before them a miserable head of 100,000 Christians, men, women, and little children, destined for sale in the Turkish slave markets. Disturbances in Asia Minor had hastened Suleiman's departure from Hungary, but he returned in the third year still more menacing and more formidable. The struggle was now to be with Austria, and the next campaign of Suleiman, the campaign of the first siege of Vienna, is one of the most important in German and in Ottoman history. Suleiman entered Hungary in 1529 under the pretext of placing on the throne the rightful successor to King Louis, who fell at the Mohaj. That prince died without issue, and the Archduke Ferdinand of Austria, brother of Charles V, claimed the crown as Louis' brothers-in-law, and by virtue of an old treaty, but there was an ancient law of Hungary by which none but a native prince could occupy the throne, and a powerful noble named Zapolia applied to this on opposition to Ferdinand, and procured some of the surviving magnates of the land to elect him as king. The civil war ensued, in which the adherents of Ferdinand and his Austrian forces defeated Zapolia's troops and drove him from the kingdom. Zapolia took the desperate step of applying for aid to the Sultan. Ferdinand, alarmed at the hearing of this proceeding of his rival, sent an embassy to Constantinople to negotiate for the peace with Solyman, or at least to obtain the truce. His envoys had the ill-timed boldness to require it at the same time the restoration of Belgrade and of the chief places which the Turks had captured in Hungary. Nothing could exceed the arrogance shown by the Ottoman ministers. The rival claimants of the Hungarian throne, the Grand Vizier told the Polish Palatine Lasczky, who acted as ambassador for Zapolia, that every place where the hoof of Sultan's horse once trod became at once and forever part of the Sultan's dominions. We have slain King Louis of Hungary, said the vizier. His kingdom is now ours, he to hold or to give to whom we list. The master is no king of Hungary till we make him so. It is not the crown that makes the king, it is the sword. It is the sword that brings men into subjection, and what the sword has won, the sword must keep. He promised whoever that Zapolia should be king, and that the Sultan should protect him against Ferdinand of Austria and all his other enemies. Solyman himself confirmed his vizier's promise, and added, I will be a true friend of the master. I will march in person to aid him. I swear it by our prophet Mahomet, the beloved of God, and by my sabre. Ferdinand's ambassadors were dismissed with indignant scorn. They were ordered to say from Solyman to Ferdinand that hitherto there had been little acquaintance or neighborhood between them, but that they soon should be intimate enough. He would speedily visit Ferdinand and drive him from the kingdom he had stolen. Tell him, said Solyman, that I will look for him on the field of Mohács, or even in pesth, and if he fail to meet me there, I will offer him battle beneath the walls of Vienna itself. These were no idle menaces from the Lord of the age, and the forces of Ottoman Empire were speedily mustered for the march from Constantinople to Vienna.